My name is Sergeant First Class Maya Johnson, and I've been serving in the U.S. Army for 8 years. What happened at the Fort Carson shooting range on that humid Tuesday morning in July would forever change not just my career, but the way an entire unit viewed excellence, respect, and the dangerous assumptions we make about people. I had just been transferred to the 4th Infantry Division, and like every new assignment, it came with its own set of challenges. Being one of the few black women in a predominantly white, male unit meant I was used to proving myself over and over again, but I had learned long ago that my rifle would do the talking for me. The morning started like any other. I arrived at the range early, as was my habit, to inspect my equipment and run through my mental preparation routine. My M4 carbine was pristine. I had spent the previous evening cleaning and adjusting it with the precision of a watchmaker. The morning air was crisp, and the familiar scent of gun oil and earth filled my lungs as I checked my gear one final time. Major Robert Kellison arrived with his usual swagger, his boots making sharp contact with the concrete as he surveyed the range. He was a tall man in his early 40s, with graying temples and the kind of confidence that came from years of command. Behind him followed a group of officers and senior NCOs, including some I hadn't met yet. Well, Major Kellison said, his voice carrying across the range as he noticed me setting up at Lane 7. Looks like we have our diversity quota filled for the day, gentlemen. A few chuckles rippled through the group. I kept my focus on my rifle, checking the scope alignment for the 3rd time. I had heard worse, and I knew that engaging would only make things more difficult for myself. I hope she knows which end the bullets come out of, the Major continued, louder this time, clearly intending for me to hear. Last thing we need is an accident because someone's trying to meet their inclusion numbers. Staff Sergeant Martinez, whom I had met the day before, shifted uncomfortably. Sir, Sergeant Johnson comes highly recommended. Her marksmanship scores from her previous unit were... Scores can be inflated, Martinez. Major Kellison cut him off. We'll see what she's really made of when the rubber meets the road. I finally turned to face him, my expression neutral despite the fire building in my chest. Good morning, Major. I'm ready to begin qualification whenever you give the word. He looked me up and down, his expression somewhere between amusement and disdain. Johnson, isn't it? Tell me, Sergeant, what makes you think you belong on my range with my shooters? The question hung in the air like smoke from a discharged cartridge. Every conversation around us seemed to pause. I could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on me, waiting to see how I would respond. With respect, sir, I said, keeping my voice steady, I think my performance will speak for itself. Major Kellison laughed a sharp, dismissive sound. Performance, she says. Boys, did you hear that? She thinks she can perform with the big leagues. He walked closer, invading my personal space in a way that was clearly intended to intimidate. Let me tell you something, Johnson. I've been running qualification courses for 15 years. I've seen thousands of soldiers come through this range, and I can tell within the first few shots whether someone has what it takes or if they're just wasting my time and ammunition. Then I suppose we'll know soon enough, sir. His smile was cold. Indeed we will. In fact, let's make this interesting. Instead of the standard qualification course, how about we run the Advanced Marksmanship Challenge? That's 40 rounds at various distances, 100, 200, 300, and 500 meters, mixed positions, timed sequences, and stress scenarios. Staff Sergeant Martinez stepped forward. Sir, that's typically reserved for soldiers competing for advanced marksmanship badges. It's significantly more challenging than standard qualification. I'm aware of what it is, Martinez, Major Kellison snapped. The question is whether our transfer here thinks she's up for it. All eyes turned back to me. I could feel the trap being laid, but I also knew there was only one way through it. I accept the challenge, Major. Excellent. His voice boomed with false enthusiasm. Gentlemen, gather around. We're about to witness either a remarkable display of skill or a very expensive lesson in humility. As the group assembled around Lane 7, I closed my eyes for a moment and let my mind drift back to where this all began. I was 7 years old, standing in my grandfather's backyard in rural Georgia, holding a .22 rifle that seemed impossibly heavy in my small hands. "Maya, baby girl," Grandpa Samuel had said in his deep, patient voice, "shooting ain't about the gun. It ain't about being the strongest or the loudest. It's about discipline, respect, and understanding that every shot you take is a responsibility." Grandpa Samuel was a Korean War veteran, a man who had earned his respect through service and sacrifice, though the country he served didn't always respect him in return. He had taught me that excellence was the best response to prejudice, and that mastery was earned through thousands of hours of practice, not through birthright or assumption. "Focus on your breathing," he would say as I lined up my sight picture. "The rifle is just an extension of your body. Your heartbeat, your breath, your focus, they all have to work together like a symphony." By the time I was 12, I was out shooting boys twice my age at local competitions. By 16, I held 3 state records in junior rifle competitions. When I enlisted at 18, the Army's marksmanship instructors quickly realized they had something special on their hands. But skill meant nothing if you couldn't perform when it mattered most. I opened my eyes and looked down the range. The targets had been set up at the prescribed distances, and range control had confirmed that conditions were optimal: minimal wind, good visibility, temperature steady at 78 degrees Fahrenheit. "The rules are simple," Major Kellison announced to the assembled group. 40 rounds, 4 distances, 10 rounds each. Prone supported, prone unsupported, kneeling and standing positions. Each distance has a time limit. Maximum possible score is 400 points. Anything below 340 is a failure. He paused, looking directly at me. "Of course, most soldiers barely manage 320 on this course. I'll be impressed if you break 280. I nodded and began my pre-shooting routine. First, I checked my rifle one final time: bolt, chamber, magazine, safety. Then I adjusted my sling to the precise tension I preferred. Finally, I put in my ear protection and took 3 deep, controlled breaths. "Johnson," Major Kellison called out, "before we begin, would you care to share your previous marksmanship scores with the group?" It was another test, another opportunity to appear arrogant or to diminish my own accomplishments. "I prefer to let my shooting do the talking, sir." "How diplomatic," he said with a smirk. "Range control, are we ready to begin?" The range safety officer, a senior sergeant I didn't recognize, nodded. "Range is hot. Shooter, you may begin when ready." The first stage was prone, supported at 100 meters, 10 rounds in 10 minutes. This should have been the easiest portion, a chance to settle nerves and establish rhythm. I positioned myself behind the rifle, using a sandbag rest to support the weapon. The target seemed large at this distance, the scoring rings clearly defined through my scope. I controlled my breathing, letting my heart rate settle into its natural rhythm. On the exhale, pause. At the moment of natural respiratory stillness, I squeezed the trigger with the pad of my index finger, smooth, straight back, following through completely. The first shot broke cleanly. Through the scope, I could see the bullet hole appear in the X-ring, dead center, no adjustment needed. The second shot, identical process, another X-ring hit. By the 5th shot, I could hear murmuring from behind me. By the 10th shot, the murmuring had stopped entirely. "Cease fire," the range safety officer called. "Scoring will be announced after all stages are complete." Major Kellison had been watching through binoculars. His expression was no longer amused. "Lucky start, Johnson. Let's see how you handle some distance." The 200-meter stage was prone, unsupported, no rest, just the sling and my own body position to stabilize the rifle. This is where many soldiers began to struggle, where the mechanical support gave way to human skill and consistency. I adjusted my sling, wrapping it around my support arm in the precise configuration I had practiced thousands of times. My body became a stable firing platform, every muscle group working in harmony to create steadiness. The wind was picking up slightly, maybe 3 miles per hour from the left. At 200 meters, this would move my bullet impact by perhaps an inch. I held slightly to the right to compensate and took my first shot. Another center hit. As I worked through the string of 10 shots, I could feel something changing in the atmosphere behind me. The casual conversation had stopped. The jokes and commentary had ceased. There was only the sound of my rifle firing at precise, measured intervals. Shot after shot found the center of the target. My natural point of aim was perfect, my trigger control consistent, my follow-through automatic. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. "Ceasefire," came the call. "Prepare for 300-meter kneeling." This was where the challenge truly began. Kneeling position offered less stability than prone, and 300 meters was far enough that any inconsistency in technique would be amplified and punished. I took a moment to adjust my gear and position myself. Major Kellison walked up beside me. "You know, Johnson," he said quietly, "I've been doing this for a long time. I can usually spot a fluke from real skill." I looked up at him briefly. "And what do you see, sir?" For the first time, his expression showed uncertainty. "I'm not sure yet." The kneeling position required a different kind of steadiness. I knelt behind the rifle, my support elbow resting on my forward knee, the sling providing tension and stability. At 300 meters, the target appeared smaller through the scope, the scoring rings more challenging to define. I took my time establishing my natural point of aim, ensuring that my body position would return the crosshairs to the same point after each shot without muscular effort. This was the foundation of consistent accuracy, letting biology and physics work together rather than fighting against them. The first shot at 300 meters broke cleanly, and I could see the bullet strike the target in the 9 ring, just left of center. I made a slight adjustment to my hold and fired again. This time, the bullet found the X ring. Shot after shot, I worked through the string. My shooting had found its rhythm now, each shot a meditation on precision and control. The rifle had become an extension of my body, responding to the slightest input with predictable results. "Ceasefire. Prepare for 500-meter standing." This was the moment of truth. Standing position at 500 meters was the most challenging portion of any marksmanship course. Without any external support, the shooter had to rely entirely on natural body stability, breath control, and trigger technique. At this distance, every tiny movement was magnified tenfold. I stood and adjusted my sling to the standing configuration, creating a different kind of support system. My left arm formed a stable platform for the rifle, while my right hand controlled the firing grip. My stance was slightly angled to the target, my weight evenly distributed. Through the scope, the 500-meter target looked impossibly small. The black scoring area appeared as a small dot, demanding absolute precision in sight alignment and trigger control. Major Kellison had moved to a position where he could watch both me and the target through his spotting scope. The entire group had fallen silent now, their attention focused on this final, most difficult phase. I took my time establishing my natural point of aim, letting the crosshairs settle naturally on target. Standing position required a different approach to breathing, shorter breath hold periods, accepting a certain amount of natural body movement rather than fighting it. The first shot broke, and I could see Major Kellison tracking the bullet's impact through his spotting scope. He said nothing, but his eyebrows raised slightly. Shot after shot, I worked through the final string. Each trigger pull was deliberate and controlled, each follow-through complete. I had entered that zone that every marksman knows, where conscious thought gives way to trained instinct, where the rifle fires almost of its own accord. Cease fire! The range safety officer's voice seemed to come from far away. All shooting is complete. Stand clear of the firing line for target scoring. As the targets were collected and brought forward for scoring, an unusual quiet settled over the group. Major Kellison stood with his binoculars still in hand, his expression unreadable. The other officers and NCOs clustered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. I removed my ear protection and began the ritual of clearing and securing my rifle. The familiar motions were comforting. Remove the magazine, lock the bolt open, visually inspect the chamber, let the bolt close on an empty chamber, squeeze the trigger on safe. Sergeant Johnson, Staff Sergeant Martinez approached me quietly. I've been watching marksmanship competitions for 12 years. I've never seen shooting like that. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. Where did you learn to shoot? Before I could answer, the range safety officer called out, "Target scores are ready." Major Kellison took the scoring sheets and walked toward our group. His usual swagger seemed subdued, his expression serious. He looked at the papers in his hand, then at me, then back at the papers. 100 meters, he called out, his voice carrying clearly across the range. 10 rounds fired, 10 rounds scored. Score, 100 out of 100, 10 X-ring hits. A murmur ran through the assembled group. A perfect score at any distance was noteworthy, but it was just the beginning. 200 meters, Major Kellison continued. 10 rounds fired, 10 rounds scored. Score, 100 out of 100, 10 X-ring hits. The murmuring grew louder. 2 perfect scores in a row was exceptional by any standard. 300 meters, 10 rounds fired, 10 rounds scored. Score, 99 out of 100. 9 X-ring hits, 1 9-ring hit. I remembered that shot my first at 300 meters before I had made my windage adjustment. Still, 99 out of 100 was an outstanding score at that distance. Major Kellison paused, looking at the final scoring sheet. The range had become completely silent now, everyone waiting for the final numbers. 500 meters, he said slowly. 10 rounds fired, 10 rounds scored. Score, 98 out of 100, 8 X-ring hits, 2 9-ring hits. He looked up from the papers, his eyes meeting mine across the distance. Total score, 397 out of 400 points. The silence that followed was profound. In 15 years of running advanced marksmanship courses, Major Kellison had never seen a score above 380. The range record, held by a Special Forces soldier, was 385. "That's," someone started to say, then trailed off. "That's a new range record," Staff Sergeant Martinez finished. Major Kellison walked toward me, the scoring sheet still in his hand. His expression was complex, surprise, respect, and something that might have been embarrassment all mixed together. "Sergeant Johnson," he said when he reached me, "I owe you an apology." The words hung in the air between us. I could see that they were difficult for him to say, that his pride was wrestling with his conscience. "I made assumptions about you based on..." He paused, searching for the right words. "Based on things that have nothing to do with your capability as a soldier or a marksman. That was wrong of me, and it was unprofessional." I studied his face, looking for sincerity behind the words. What I saw there was a man genuinely grappling with his own prejudices, perhaps for the first time in his career. "Apology accepted, sir," I said simply. "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's not that simple. I need you to understand that what you just did, this level of marksmanship, it's exceptional by any standard, and I nearly dismissed you before you even had a chance to show what you could do." He turned to address the group, his voice carrying the authority of command. "Gentlemen, what we just witnessed was a masterclass in marksmanship. Sergeant Johnson has just set a new range record, and she did it under pressure, with everyone watching, after being challenged to prove herself. The group began to approach, offering congratulations and asking questions about technique and training. The atmosphere had shifted completely from the casual dismissal of the morning to genuine respect and curiosity. Later that afternoon, Major Kellison asked me to remain after the formal training session ended. We sat in his office, the scoring sheets spread out on his desk between us. "I want you to tell me about your background," he said. "Not because I don't believe what I saw, but because I need to understand how I could have been so wrong about someone." I told him about Grandpa Samuel, about growing up on a farm where marksmanship was both necessity and art. I told him about the thousands of hours of practice, the competitions, the disciplined training that had shaped my skills over 2 decades. "My grandfather used to say that the rifle doesn't care what color you are, what gender you are, or where you come from," I said. "It only responds to skill, discipline, and respect." Major Kellison nodded slowly. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." He was. He also taught me that excellence is the best response to prejudice. Not anger, not argument, but simply being undeniably good at what you do. "And that's what you did today." "That's what I do every day, sir. Today just happened to be witnessed by more people." He was quiet for a long moment, studying the scoring sheets. "You know, in 15 years of running this range, I've developed what I thought was a good eye for talent. I was proud of my ability to spot the natural shooters, the soldiers who had that special combination of skill and composure, and today challenged that assumption. Today shattered that assumption," he corrected. "I looked at you and saw my own biases. Instead of seeing a soldier, that's not just wrong, it's dangerous. In combat, those kinds of assumptions can get people killed." I could see that this was more than just a professional realization for him. This was personal, a moment of uncomfortable self-awareness that would likely change how he approached his job and his interactions with soldiers. "Sir, if I may," I said, "what matters now is what you do with this lesson." He looked up at me, his expression questioning. "You have the opportunity to take this experience and use it to be better," I continued. "To help other soldiers who might face the same assumptions I face today, to ensure that talent is recognized, regardless of what package it comes in." Major Kellison stood and walked to the window overlooking the range. "You're right, of course. The question is whether I have the courage to really examine my own behavior and change it. The fact that you're asking that question suggests you do, sir." He turned back to me, and for the first time that day, I saw genuine respect in his expression. "Sergeant Johnson, I'd like to ask you to consider applying for the Army Marksmanship Unit. With scores like these and the composure you showed under pressure, you could compete at the national level." It was an unexpected offer, one that could change the entire trajectory of my military career. "I appreciate that, sir, but my goal has always been to be a soldier first, marksman second." "Fair enough. But I want you to know that if you ever change your mind, you'll have my strongest recommendation." We talked for another hour about marksmanship, about leadership, and about the importance of challenging our own assumptions. When I finally left his office, I felt something had fundamentally changed, not just in how he saw me, but in how he would see other soldiers in the future. Word of what happened at the range spread quickly through the unit. Over the next few days, I noticed a subtle but significant shift in how I was treated by my fellow soldiers. The casual dismissal was gone, replaced by genuine interest in my background and experience. Staff Sergeant Martinez approached me during PT the next morning. "Johnson, would you be willing to help with some of our struggling shooters? We've got 3 soldiers who barely qualified last time, and I think they could benefit from your expertise." "Of course, Staff Sergeant. And there's something else," he said, lowering his voice. "Major Kellison has asked me to review our pre-qualification training program. He wants to make sure we're not making assumptions about soldiers' capabilities based on anything other than their actual performance." It was a small but important change, the kind of systemic adjustment that could prevent other soldiers from facing the same challenges I had encountered. Working with the struggling shooters proved to be one of the most rewarding experiences of my military career. Corporal Anderson, a young soldier from Ohio who had never held a rifle before joining the Army, was particularly eager to learn. "Sergeant," he said during our first training session, "I heard about what happened with Major Kellison. That was pretty incredible." "The incredible part wasn't the shooting, Corporal. It was what happened afterward." "What do you mean?" "Major Kellison recognized his mistake and took responsibility for it. He used it as an opportunity to grow and to make positive changes. That takes more courage than hitting targets. As we worked together on fundamentals, breathing, sight alignment, trigger control, I found myself repeating the same lessons Grandpa Samuel had taught me decades earlier. The rifle doesn't care about your background. It only responds to skill and discipline." 3 weeks later, all 3 of the struggling shooters passed their qualification with scores well above the minimum standard. Corporal Anderson, in particular, had shown remarkable improvement, earning an expert rating on his first attempt. "How did you do it?" Major Kellison asked me after reviewing the qualification scores. "The same way my grandfather taught me, sir, with patience, respect, and the understanding that everyone has potential if given the proper instruction and encouragement." 2 months after the incident at the range, Major Kellison approached me with an unusual request. The annual inter-unit marksmanship competition was approaching, and he wanted me to represent our battalion. "I know you said your preference was to be a soldier first," he said, "but this competition includes soldiers from across the division. It would be an opportunity to represent not just our unit, but to show what kind of excellence we're capable of producing." I agreed to participate, partly because I enjoyed the challenge of competition, but mostly because I understood the broader significance. My performance would reflect not just on me personally, but on every soldier who had ever been underestimated or dismissed because of others' assumptions. The competition drew participants from 12 different units, including several soldiers with national-level competitive experience. The format was similar to the advanced marksmanship challenge I had faced months earlier, but with additional stages and more demanding standards. Major Kellison accompanied me to the competition as my unit's representative. As we walked onto the range, I could see him taking note of the other competitors, almost exclusively white males, many with the confident bearing of experienced competitive shooters. "Nervous?" he asked me as we checked in at the registration table. "No, sir. Excited." The competition began with a technical briefing and equipment inspection. My rifle, the same M4 I had been using for training, drew some curious looks from competitors who had brought highly modified precision rifles with custom barrels and specialized optics. "You're shooting that?" one competitor asked, gesturing at my standard-issue weapon. "It's what I train with every day," I replied. He shrugged and moved on, apparently dismissing me as serious competition. The first stage was long-range precision at 600 meters, a distance that had been added specifically for this competition. It was beyond the range of standard qualification courses, demanding not just technical skill, but also advanced knowledge of ballistics and environmental factors. As I set up for my first shots, I could see Major Kellison watching from the observation area. His expression was calm, but I could tell he was paying close attention to everything happening around us. The wind at 600 meters was tricky variable direction and speed that required constant adjustment. I took my time reading the conditions, using grass and mirage indicators to judge the air currents between me and the target. My first shot struck the target in the 8 ring, slightly left of center. I adjusted my hold and fired again, this time hitting the 9 ring. By my 5th shot, I had found the rhythm of the wind and began placing shots consistently in the X ring. When the scoring was completed, I had placed second in the long-range stage, an excellent result that put me in contention for the overall championship. The competition continued through multiple stages over 2 days. With each stage, I could see the other competitors taking notice, their initial dismissal giving way to genuine respect for my performance. On the final day, going into the last stage, I was tied for first place with a sergeant from the 82nd Airborne Division, a soldier with extensive competitive experience and multiple national-level championships. The final stage was a stress shoot, multiple targets at various ranges, with time, pressure, and physical challenges designed to test performance under adverse conditions. It was the kind of stage where technical skill had to be combined with mental toughness and tactical thinking. As I moved through the course, engaging targets from different positions and ranges, I felt the familiar calm that comes from complete focus. Each target was a separate challenge, each shot an individual problem to be solved. When the final scores were tallied, I had won the overall championship by a single point, the closest margin in the competition's history. As I stood on the podium receiving the championship trophy, I could see Major Kellison in the crowd, his expression one of genuine pride and satisfaction. But more importantly, I could see other soldiers in the audience, soldiers who might face their own challenges with assumptions and prejudices, watching and understanding that excellence comes in all forms. 6 months later, Major Kellison received orders for a new assignment. Before he left, he asked to speak with me one final time. "Johnson," he said, "I want you to know that what happened between us that day at the range changed me as an officer and as a person." "I'm glad to hear that, sir." "No, I don't think you understand. I've implemented new training protocols for the marksmanship program. I've revised how we evaluate soldier potential. I've made it a point to challenge my own assumptions about every soldier who comes through this unit." He paused, looking out the window at the range where it all began. "But more than that, I've started questioning assumptions in other areas of my life, about leadership, about fairness, about what it means to truly evaluate someone's worth and potential. That's the most important outcome of all, sir. I want you to know that your example, not just your shooting, but your professionalism in the face of disrespect, has made me a better leader. And through me, it's going to make this unit better for every soldier who serves here after you." After Major Kellison left, I remained with the unit for another 18 months. During that time, I continued to work with soldiers on marksmanship training, but I also found myself taking on broader mentoring responsibilities. Young soldiers, particularly those who felt they had something to prove, would seek me out for advice and guidance. I would tell them about Grandpa Samuel, about the importance of letting excellence speak for itself, and about the power of changing minds through performance rather than argument. The unit's marksmanship scores improved dramatically during my time there. More importantly, the culture began to shift toward one that valued actual performance over assumptions and stereotypes. Chapter 9. Reflection. 3 years after that morning at the range, I was promoted to Sergeant First Class and transferred to a training command position. My job was to develop marksmanship curricula for the entire Army, working with soldiers from every background and demographic. Often, I would think back to that day when Major Kellison challenged me to prove myself. At the time, it had felt like harassment, like an unfair test designed to highlight my differences rather than showcase my abilities. But with the perspective of time, I could see it differently. That challenge had created an opportunity not just for me to demonstrate my skills, but for an entire group of people to confront their own biases and assumptions. The silence that followed my performance wasn't just about shock at my marksmanship scores. It was the sound of minds changing, of preconceptions being shattered, of people being forced to reconsider what they thought they knew about talent and potential. In my new role, I made it a point to tell that story to every class of instructors I trained. Not as a story of personal triumph, but as a lesson about the importance of evaluating soldiers based on their actual capabilities rather than superficial characteristics. "The rifle doesn't see color," I would tell them, echoing my grandfather's words. "It doesn't see gender or background or economic status. It only responds to skill, discipline, and respect. Our job as leaders is to recognize and develop that skill wherever we find it. Some of the instructors would nod politely, thinking they already understood this lesson. Others would ask thoughtful questions about how to identify and overcome their own biases. But occasionally, I would see that look of recognition, the same look I had seen in Major Kellison's eyes when he realized how wrong his assumptions had been. Those were the moments that made the story worth telling. 5 years after the range incident, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Major Kellison, now Lieutenant Colonel Kellison, calling from his new assignment at Fort Benning. "Johnson," he said, "I have a proposition for you." He explained that he had been tasked with developing a new advanced marksmanship program for the Army, one that would train instructor-trainers who would then spread improved techniques throughout the service. "I want you to head this program," he said. "I can't think of anyone better qualified, not just because of your technical skills, but because of your understanding of what it means to overcome barriers and change minds." It was an opportunity I had never imagined, the chance to influence marksmanship training across the entire Army, to ensure that future generations of soldiers would be evaluated fairly and trained effectively, regardless of their background. "There's one more thing," Lieutenant Colonel Kellison added. "I want you to help me write the training materials. Specifically, I want to include case studies about unconscious bias and the importance of evaluating soldiers based on performance rather than assumptions." "Including our story, sir?" "Especially our story. I think it's important for leaders to understand how easily we can make mistakes and how much talent we might miss if we're not careful." I accepted the position, and 6 months later found myself standing in front of the first class of the Advanced Marksmanship Instructor course. The students were a diverse group, men and women, various races and backgrounds, soldiers from every type of unit in the Army. As I began the first lecture, I could see some of them sizing me up, making their own quick judgments about what I might be capable of teaching them. It was a familiar dynamic, one that I had learned to navigate with patience and professionalism. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to tell you a story about the dangers of assumptions and the power of keeping an open mind." I told them about Major Kellison's challenge, about the pressure of performing under scrutiny, and about the profound silence that followed when preconceptions collided with reality. "The lesson isn't about marksmanship scores," I concluded. "It's about recognizing that excellence comes in forms we might not expect, and that our job as leaders is to create opportunities for every soldier to demonstrate their full potential." As I looked out at the class, I could see that some of them were already understanding the deeper message. Others would need time and experience to fully grasp it. But the seed was planted, and that was how change began. One conversation, one challenge, one moment of silence at a time. Today, as a Master Sergeant with over 15 years of service, I continue to work in marksmanship training and development. The program Lieutenant Colonel Kellison and I created has trained over 3,000 instructor trainers who have gone on to work with hundreds of thousands of soldiers around the world. The story of what happened at Fort Carson has become part of Army marksmanship lore, told and retold in classrooms and training centers. But more importantly, it has become a tool for discussing the broader issues of bias, assumption, and the importance of fair evaluation. I still keep in touch with Lieutenant Colonel Kellison, now Colonel Kellison, and commanding a training brigade. He tells me that the lessons from our encounter continue to influence his leadership philosophy and decision-making. "You know," he said in a recent conversation, "that day at the range was one of the most important learning experiences of my career, not just about marksmanship, but about leadership and human nature. When young soldiers ask me about dealing with prejudice and assumptions, I always give them the same advice my grandfather gave me. Let your excellence speak for itself." Don't waste energy fighting assumptions, simply be undeniably good at what you do. But I also tell them that change is possible, that minds can be opened, and that every exceptional performance creates an opportunity to challenge someone's preconceptions. The silence that follows excellence is often the sound of barriers being broken and new possibilities being born. My grandfather's old .22 rifle still hangs above the fireplace in my quarters, a reminder of where this journey began. Sometimes, when I'm struggling with a particularly challenging training problem or dealing with my own moments of doubt, I'll take it down and remember his words. The rifle doesn't care what color you are, what gender you are, or where you come from. It only responds to skill, discipline, and respect. That truth, simple as it is, continues to guide everything I do as a soldier, an instructor, and a leader. And every time I share that story about a major who laughed at a black woman on a shooting range, and the silence that followed when she proved him wrong, I'm reminded that the most powerful response to prejudice is not anger or argument. It's excellence.